The Habs have a sneaky good addition to their prospect development camp in Alex Zetterberg, a goal-scoring player from Swedish Junior League that somehow didn't get drafted. This could end up being a huge steal for Montreal. We're going to get into that, plus Macklin Celebrini's comments on Lane Hutson and what makes him so sure Lane Hutson's going to be a star in the league. And Habs goalie prospect Quentin Miller has some very strong takes about his position in the goaltender hierarchy in the organization. So you're not going to want to miss this episode of Habs Digest. Jesse, we're going to get straight into it. And I wanted to start with Quentin Miller. Now, Quentin Miller, as you guys know, Habs draft pick, goaltender. He played in the Q this year. He played last year at the Quebec Remparts. He's kind of moved around to a couple teams, but he had a few interviews recently where he was talking a bit about where he sees himself in this organization. I wanted to just show you guys some quotes from him. And the first one here, I'm going to translate this. He said, basically, it's normal for an athlete to have your lows, but you learn from it and you grow, but if you keep pushing, it'll come back. He said, one time, I was pulled 3 straight games and I kept doing my thing. And guess what? It came back. And then on his status within the organization, he basically says it's great to have that competition with other guys like Fowler, like Dobeš that push me. He said, but I see their level and I know that I can be better than them. That pushes me. But I try not to stress myself out too much. Jesse, those are some bold words from Quentin Miller. I am loving these Habs goaltending prospects, and even a guy we'll get into, I'm sure, in a video very soon, but focusing on Miller for now, this kind of stuff, this is exactly what you want to hear. These Habs goalies all seem to have that killer instinct.
Exactly that, right? He's a goalie, but he's still shooting his shot. And I love to see this, right? Because we got a lot of players in the mix, unless you kind of take your place by one way or another. Bold words, obviously you need to back it up on the ice, but you need to use both of this to really get the attention of this organization and let them know, and also your competitors, that you mean business, right? And for me, I think that that's just a blessing for the Montreal Canadiens, already so highly touted. Jacob Fowler, Quentin Miller, though, we know he has the size. It's just last year, right, with the Quebec Remparts, they were in a rebuild. And that's the tough thing about being like not just a prospect, but a goalie prospect. Seems like there's so much more ups and downs. It's like you're kind of at the whims of, oh, my team is now in a rebuild after kind of being at the Memorial Cup, So it's like that affects you as a young goalie. But this guy has all the attributes that he really needs, right? And you just got to keep pushing. But I love that attitude, especially that we're getting from like a lot of our young prospects, like being asked at the development camp, like, where do you see yourself kind of in this depth chart against these guys you're competing against, getting these tough questions? And they're just like, you know what? Like, competition's always going to be there. It matters what I do. That's what I have control of. If I take care of that, that's going to sort itself out. So obviously we see that the competition is very healthy this year.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like hearing, these things from Jacob Fowler, and I mean, he said himself, I'm going to turn my volume up a bit. He said himself, like he watched that video from last year when he was about to get drafted, all this stuff. It's really, really cool to see these guys are taking everything so seriously and they're so confident in themselves. To have a guy like Fowler who's like, I just win. Let me show that to you. And a guy like Quentin Miller who was like, I can be better than Fowler or Dobeš. It's a blessing to have these guys in the org, and I cannot wait to see what he does next. But speaking of guys, that's a blessing to have, Jesse. We got to talk about some of Macklin Celebrini's comments on Lane Hutson. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably seen this, but I just wanted to discuss this because, of course, Macklin Celebrini recently, a few days ago, I believe, maybe even almost a week ago, but he was on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast, and he was there talking a bit about Lane Hutson, and I wanted to show you guys one of the quotes that he had. He said, I've played with a lot of great players, but to play with him, like the way he sees the ice, the plays that he makes, there's some breaks in between here, but I made this a little concise for you guys. The plays that he makes, the head fakes, watching him do what he did, that's just the kind of player he is. He's a special player. He goes on to say, Jesse, that he's sure that Hutson's going to be a star in the NHL. He said, it's one of those things, like you watch Hutson play, and he does these head fakes, and you think, well, I'll never fall for that until Hutson does it to you. He said there were some times in practice where Macklin basically said he had to give up because of how good Lane Hutson was, how shifty he is. To hear that from one of the top prospects of the past number of years, maybe not the top, I know there's Bedard, whatever, but Macklin projects to be a superstar in the NHL, and basically things would have to fall apart for him not to be an elite player. For him to say this stuff about Lane Hutson, I know it's his teammate, Jesse, but regardless, it's incredibly encouraging.
And it matters a lot, not just because Macklin Celebrini is #1 overall draft pick, but also he's known for having like a good two-way game, right? Of being good defensively, right? But he says, Lane Hutson, he can break my ankles basically every time. Like, that's unreal, right? These guys aren't throwing out praise. Like, this is absolutely elite. It matters. And I'm so happy that Lane Hutson is getting this praise, right? Because obviously he's still going to have the haters. He's still going to have the people giving him his knocks until they just have no choice but to eat their words when they see what he's doing at the NHL level. But he's going to have to put up with this. But this is helping a lot. I think it really matters. And we see it from the eye test, right? But coming from Macklin Celebrini, another really skilled player, I think it's just so encouraging, not only for Lane, but the whole organization.
How blessed were we to see these guys play together? I know we were hoping to see them both play together in a Habs uniform, but my goodness, Lane Hutson. This is just sort of a short section to let you guys know what Macklin had to say about Lane Hutson, but basically every Habs fan who's seeing this, there's posts out there, who's going to break out for your team next year. Hutson's a guy that's going to be on the NHL map next year, and I think Macklin's going to give him his praise as well. Whenever San Jose plays the Habs, mark that down on your calendar, because I think people are really going to realize what kind of special player we have. But Jesse, Lane Hutson, the thing with him, he's small, right? He's very small. He's grown a bit now, but that was always the knock on him. That's why he was picked so low. That transitions very well into this guy that we got to talk about now. Now, I say steal because I actually believe this. He was not drafted, but we're talking about Alex Zetterberg. Have you guys heard of Alex Zetterberg? Maybe, maybe not. If you see him right there at the bottom of this chart for the Habs development camp roster, he's a center right-hand shot, 5'8", 159 pounds from Sundsvall, Sweden. Very small guy. But have you seen his stats? He was an invite. He got texted to join this, Jesse, from a member of the Habs org. Texted. He was in Vegas for the draft, and he went undrafted, despite having 21 goals, 58 points in the Swedish Junior League as an undersized guy. His scouting report, especially from Elite Prospects, basically says he's great without the puck, he's super creative, he's shifty, he can make passes through, threading defenses. A lot of those things sound awfully familiar to things we hear about Lane Hutson, these guys who have this level of skill, but are just not tall enough. Jesse, if he was a couple inches taller, I think it's a guarantee he would have been drafted. He's definitely small, he's definitely slight, but the skill that he has shown has me quite impressed that we have him in the development camp roster, and I'm actually really excited to see where the Habs go with him. Now, I'm not expecting him to play in the NHL or anything, maybe not even in the AHL, I don't know, but this is just one of those low-risk moves that I feel like could end up randomly paying off big if certain things go right.
It was a low-risk move on skill because the Montreal Canadiens drafted size in other places in this draft. We could see a big priority. Kent Hughes said that this was important, and definitely like how we kind of targeted goalies last year. I think in a lot of ways, for the most part, where it made sense, size was really one of the major factors in kind of deciding that, especially in those rounds, obviously 3 onwards this year. But this is an interesting player, right? We bring the comparisons to Lane Hutson, not just because of the size as well, but again, important to caveat that Lane has been able to have success despite his size, right? When you start to get size other places in your lineup, there maybe you can kind of sprinkle it in. It always can be a factor, but if you have the balance, it can work. And that's what's so interesting to see with Lane, right? It's still surprising to us because we're just not used in the NHL, but it's seeming like a new trend that absolutely can work, right? So it's really interesting to see. He's going to be going to Boston University, the same place where Lane played. And obviously they have a very great system for turning out NHL players. So he's smaller, but there's a chance for some growth spurts here for him to grow. He has a whole NCAA career, right, to kind of go through. He's shown, though, that he can be a points getter for sure. So this guy's got a lot of runway, Josh, and we're going to need to keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah, it's an interesting dude. Now, I mean, I don't know if the Habs are going to keep him around or anything, but, you feel bad for him because he was in Vegas. He was expecting to be drafted. I mean, with those numbers, why would you expect anything else? But he's just so tiny. He needs to eat a little bit more. He maybe needs to hit the gym a little bit more. But we've seen small guys succeed at the NHL level. And apparently he has a booming shot from the faceoff dot as well. So excited to see what comes of this development camp. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But what do you guys think of Alex Zetterberg? Are we getting too hyped over nothing? Or do you also think that maybe if things go right, this could be a nice little sneaky move for Montreal? Let us know down below. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. Even if, it's a bit of a chaotic time for us, for Habs fans, for all the news, we really appreciate you all sticking with us. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.